Hi guys, welcome back to another video. Today, by popular demand, we'll be looking at drawings in Fusion 360, commonly referred to as shop drawings, which you can see an example of here on my screen. So if you'd like to know how you can create these from your 3D models, stick around and I'll show you the basics. Shop drawings are very useful if you're looking to send something off to be manufactured, but they're also just great to have around as a reference for yourself. It's just a good way of getting across all the information that's important about your design. So let's jump into it and create one of these for a simple design in Fusion 360. So as I said, I've created a very basic design here just to show you the basics of drawings and some of the most important things you need to know to get started. So we're in the design workspace here, which a lot of you are probably already familiar with. So what we're going to do is switch to the drawing workspace. So in the top left here, we've got this drop down. You want to click on that, come down to drawing and from design. Now you'll see a menu pop up here on the right, and what that's going to ask you basically is, do we want to create a drawing from a full assembly or a select part of the assembly? So for now, what I'm going to do is click full assembly, but if there's a part that you specifically want to pick out to add to your drawing, you can click select, and what that lets you do is select any component from the component tree, and that'll be used in our drawing. As I said, for now, I'm just going to leave this on full assembly. Underneath are a bunch of specs, so for drawing, we're going to create new from scratch. These are the units, so I'm going to use ISO, which basically is millimeters, and lets me define a sheet size here in millimeters, or in the UK we have paper sizes A4, A3, etc. In the US it might be different, so you might want to go for ASME and select something else. I'm going to go with ISO. I'm going to select the second one down here, which should be landscape, and then I'm going to hit OK. That's going to take us to a completely new workspace. And as you can see at the top here, we've got a bunch of different tools. This drawing has opened up in a new tab. So our design is in a separate tab. The drawing is in a new tab. So as I said earlier, this has opened up a completely new workspace. We've got a whole bunch of new tools across the top. But there are things here that are familiar. We can see we've got the component tree here on the left. Very similar to what we see here in the design workspace. And that all kind of works the same. In the center here we've got, in this case, we've got an A4 sheet, that's landscape. We've got some details at the bottom which are common on a CAD drawing. And from here basically we can place whatever we want on this sheet. But the first thing before we go and add anything, we're going to make sure we set up our document settings. So up here there's a tab called document settings, and you want to click that little drop down. And in here we can define everything we want about this drawing. You can see you can change the font if you want to, there's tons of stuff. So one of the more important ones here is dimension units. So we're going to click on the little icon next to that so that we can edit it. We kind of set this earlier on, we've got units as millimeters, linear precision. This is important. By default, Fusion 360 sets this to 2 decimal places. I recommend using 3 just because if you have a measurement like, say, 0.275 of a millimeter, if this is set to 2 decimal places, that'll get rounded up. And if somebody's drafting up a CAD design based on your drawing, that measurement's going to be wrong effectively. So make sure you set these to at least 3 decimal places. And I like to see the leading zeros as well, so I'm going to tick that. And you can also do display dimension units, which I also like. So when we display our dimensions, we'll see the millimeter units on there as well. So I'm going to tick that and then hit OK. And that's our basic settings done for now. So we're going to minimize that. And now here comes the fun stuff. So now we need to add our design into this drawing. And all we need to do first of all is, if you look up in the top left of the screen, click on create, you can see we've got a bunch of different views here. We've got a base view, a projected view, a section view, and a detailed view. Now typically you always want to start with a base view because that's kind of the main one that everything else inherits off. So if we click on base view and hover over our drawing, notice we can see our part here, and it's going to ask us to place it. Now there's a box up here on the right, and you can see there's a few different settings in there. We've got representation, that's going to be model. Orientation, I'm going to go for top, and you can see that's changed the view that we're looking at, the model, similar to what you'd see in the design workspace. And then we've got style, and we'll come back to that one in a second. But then we've also got scale. So depending on how big your sheet of paper is, that value is going to change. But for example, if I change it to 1:1, you can see that's changed the size of the design now in my workspace. And I'm going to leave it at 1:1, and I'm just going to click anywhere on the screen, and that'll place that for me, and then I'm going to hit OK. Now you can see what that's done now is it's added that top view of my model into this drawing. Now if I go and double click anywhere on this drawing, that menu will pop back up, and we can change the styles, right? So if I go to shaded up here and click close, you can see that we've now got the same model in there, but it looks a little bit different. And sometimes this is nice if you want to do like a section analysis, which I'll show you in a second. But I'm just going to double click again, change this back to visible edges, and hit close. So if you just wanted to do one view, you could click and place this anywhere, and you can continue and add some dimensions. But what I want to show you first is something called a projected view. So if we go up to create, click on projected view. This is really cool. So what this does is it takes your base view and lets you add other views to the sheet based on which direction you move it. So for example, if I click and move to the right, you can see that we're now looking at my design from the right. If we go to the left, that'll change, and we're now looking at it from the left. If I pull down, we're looking at it from that front view, and if I go towards the back, we're looking at it from the back view. So if we wanted to add all of these, we could. And if you drag down at an angle, you can see we get that sort of angled view. Now what I'll do is I'll drag down at an angle to the right and just let go and click, and you'll see that little tick pop up. Just click that. Now I'm going to double click on this. I'm going to change the scale up here to be 1:2, and I'm going to make this shaded and click close. Now I'm going to go and drag this down into this little box down here, and we may need to change the scale, so let's make it 1:3, click close. Now generally, sometimes this little box can be used for a preview of your model. So if somebody picks up the sheet, they can see what the model looks like, and then when they're referencing the actual drawings, it makes a little bit more sense. So I just like to leave that down there. You don't have to, I like to do it. Now back to the base view. If we wanted to go back and go create projected view, one of the views I'm going to need here obviously is the bottom view like this. So if I wanted to add a few of them in, I'll show you. We can just click. We're happy with that. We can go to create projected view, click again, move to the right. We could have that one if we wanted to. I don't need this one, so I'm not going to add it, but you get the idea. You can add whatever views you need. To get rid of this, you can just hit escape, and that'll remove that tool. Notice as well now, if we move this one around, the projected view follows it because it kind of inherits from that base view, and that's what I talked about before. You always want to place your base view first, and then any other angles that you want to view that from, you can do that this way. So what we can do is add some dimensions, and this is important. So similar to what you'd see in a sketch, you can do this as a drawing. So up on the menu here, notice we've got a tool called dimensions, or you can just hit D on the keyboard, exact same as sketching. So if we hit that dimension tool, if I just hover over one line, what it'll do is it'll give me the entire distance of that line. But obviously I have fillets on the corner of my block here, so that's not really going to be useful. Similar to sketching, you always want kind of one origin point that you do your dimensions from, and in this case that's going to be the two very edges. So as I said, you can select one line, select another line, and add in your dimension, and that just adds it in for you. If you want to move this around after you've placed it, you can click on the arrow and you'll see this little circle. You can just move that around like that. Now one thing I like to do is adjust the text. The text is a little big here and I like to keep it quite clean. So if we go back up here to document settings, under where it says font, click the edit button next to it. We can set the font to be small, hit OK, and there we go. We can see we've got that smaller font there, which I like. But again, it's personal preference. So now let's do the same thing, but we're going to add a dimension again, but this time we're going to do the two vertical lines and drag that up. And now we've got dimensions for our width and our height. And now what we can do is add dimensions to these circles. Typically what I like to do here is first add a center mark. So up here on the menu under geometry, if you select center mark and hover over any circle and click, it'll place a center mark for you. We're going to do that for all three circles here, and you'll see why this is useful in just a second. So if we go back now to our dimension tool, and I want to add a dimension of this center circle, Just like before, we can select the line on the right, we can select the center point of that circle. If we come up, similar to sketching, we can place another dimension. And as I said, you always want to be using one line as kind of a reference for all your others. And because we know this is halfway between the full length of this block, we can do the same here. We can go to dimension and we can set the dimension of these outer two circles from the middle one. So if we add these by clicking, just place that. Same again, we grab our dimension tool, click our center circle, click our left circle, pull up, and there we go. And again, just like before, if you want to move these around, you can click and you'll see that little icon pop up. You can just drag them wherever you want. So let's go ahead and do the exact same for the vertical position of our circle. So if we click the center point, we click our bottom line here, come across, click again, and we can obviously see that's in the center, which is 25mm. And another thing that's really useful to know here is how to add a center line. So in a sketch, sometimes you'll add a draft line to guide you for positioning certain constraints. And on here, if somebody else was looking at this design, even though you can see that the center circle is 25mm from this bottom line or in the center, you couldn't necessarily assume that these are also following that line. So what you could do to make someone a bit more sure of that is go up to geometry, center line, and in this case you can select two lines and it'll place a center line exactly between those two lines. So in this case we want a horizontal one that's going through the center of our circles. So I'm going to select this top line and this bottom line, and notice there's a line in here now that if I click on it, two arrows pop up and I can drag this out. So if I wanted to just extend these, and now you can see clearly that there is a center line here, and this would just reassure somebody that these circles are actually coincident with this center horizontal line. And these are the kind of things you want to think about when creating a drawing. The idea of the drawing is that you give somebody else all the information they need to reproduce your design or your 3D model. We can also add some dimensions in for our diameter or radius, and if we go up to dimensions again, you can just select the dimension tool, and if you click on the edge of the circle, by default it's going to do the diameter. But if you hit escape, come back to dimensions, you can select radius if you want to, and the radius is actually very useful for fillets too. So if we select radius, obviously you can see I've got fillets here on the corner of my block. Let's select this top left one, and I can just place this dimension down, and now it's clear that that fillet is of a 7.5mm radius. Again, if we grab the dimension tool, we can add these diameters in. So I'm going to click the center circle, you can see that's 20mm, place that down. I'm going to do the same for the outer two, so I'm going to place this one, that's going to be 15, same for the outer one, 15. Let's move that around, and there we go. It's pretty cool, very similar to sketching, as you can see. One other thing I want to show you is that you can add labels and custom text. So next to dimensions here on the menu, there's a text button. If you just click on that, if you click and drag, works similar to the text box in sketching. You can just enter something in here, so I could say top view, for example. If you highlight this, you could change the font size. I'm going to make it 5. We'll make it bold as well. Hit close, and there we go. You can click and drag this around just like you normally would in sketching. I'm going to place that over here just for now. And the other thing you can do is add labels. This is useful for annotation, if you want to point something out in a design. So if we select the second icon across here, you can see it says note. Click on that. Now you can click on any part of this design. I'm going to just select the center circle as an example. And if you click and drag away from it, you'll see this little arrow comes across. So you can type wherever you want in here. So I'm just going to use this as an example. And then if you just click off it, you can now see we got that label here. And again, you can move this around if you want to. And that pretty much covers the basics of the dimensions. Now you can see here we have another view from our projected view, which is our side view. And the only other dimension we really need from this is the height. So this top view, it pretty much tells us everything we know about the width, the length, we know how big the holes are, we know about the fillets on the edge. The only thing we don't know about at the moment is height and the depth of those holes. What we can do here, as I said, I created a sort of side view by doing that projected view. But what we're going to do is delete that for a sec. So if we click on it and hit delete on the keyboard, what we'll do instead is add a cross-section view. And this is really useful. So if we go up to create, come down to section view, and what you can do here is select 2 points on wherever you want to do a section cut. So if you watched last week's video, I showed you section analysis and how that's useful for sketching and in the 3D workspace. This is similar to that. So with that tool selected, it's going to ask us to select the parent view, which is obviously this one. And then you'll see a little arrow pop up with an A next to it, and that's point A. So I'm going to select this center line here, which you can see the little triangle pops up. I'm going to come across and select another center line, and then I'm going to hit the tick. Now if I drag up, you can see what that's done. It's created a cross-section cut in the very center of this block from that side view that we had before. Now if we click and just hit OK, we can also move this around as well. So if we click it and drag it down, so notice this cross section has a label above it. It says A to A, 1 to 1. And what that's saying is this is a cross section from point A here to point A here. And you can see those 2 arrows next to the A pointing towards the back. And that's telling you what direction the cross section is looking from. So we're looking from this front side backwards, and we can see the depth of those holes. And just like I showed you before, if we hover over this, you'll see a bounding box appear around it. If we double click on that bounding box, that menu pops up on the right, and we can make those adjustments again. So if we want to make this a shaded view, hit close. You can see that shaded view looks really nice as a cross section. And now we could go ahead just like we did before and add our dimensions in. So if I go up to the dimension tool, I wanted to add information about the height before. So if I just go ahead and select the top line and the bottom line, come across, we now know that the height is 25 millimeters. Perfect. And we can do the exact same thing for the depth of these holes. So if we grab the dimension tool, hit D on the keyboard, we can select a point here on the top of our object, select a point at the bottom of the hole, drag to the left, and you can see that we have a dimension there of 10 millimeters. So again, if we click on this parent view at the top and drag it around, that bottom view of the cross section follows it around because this top view is the parent view and that's a child of the parent view. One other thing I'm going to show you which is really useful is called a detailed view. And this is particularly useful if you have something small on your design. So let's say in the corner here I had a really small little hole, and adding dimensions to that on this would look a little bit messy, or it wouldn't look quite right. So what you could do is go up to create, detail view, select a parent view again, which is obviously this one. Then it's going to ask you to select a point on the design. Now I'm going to select this bottom left fillet here in the exact center. I'm just going to click, and if I drag out you can see this circle. Now everything inside this circle will be part of the detail view. So I'm just going to click again, and if I drag across now and click, you can see it's placed everything that was within this circle here, which is labeled B, has now been blown up a little bit larger on its own drawing. And in the menu again on the right, you can see the scale of that is 2 to 1. So I'm going to go ahead and make that 3 to 1. You could even go bigger if you wanted to, but 3 to 1 is okay. I'm just going to hit OK. And now we can see we have this section over here. Now if we double click the bounding box like before, I'm going to make this a shaded view by clicking this box here, hit close, and now what we could do is go to dimensions, grab that dimension tool, click on this fillet here, and I can add a dimension there. So you can see that if we had a small hole here somewhere, you could blow that up to make it easier for the designer to see. You could see all the details for that smaller object, and you could annotate it a lot more effectively. You can also see that it's very nicely added a label automatically. It says B 3 to 1, which references this circle here, B, which is that detailed view. So one thing you might be wondering is, well, what happens when I make changes to my 3D model, right? So if I go back to the model, if I jump into a sketch here, and I change this dimension to 130, hit OK. If I finish the sketch, save the 3D model, and now when we go back to the drawing, in the top left here you'll see a little triangle, almost like a warning, and you want to click on that. And what that'll do is it'll update the drawing to reference our new parameters in the 3D model. And you see there that will have updated, and we've now got our new width in here of 130. And it all works really quite nicely, and it makes your workflow a lot easier. Notice though what that did is where our detailed view is, that's slightly changed that now because we had a bigger width. So if we click the circle here of our detailed view, grab the center point, we can still drag this around and change it wherever we want. So I'm going to replace that in the center of this fillet, and that's now updated that detailed view for us. Another thing that's pretty useful to know is creating additional sheets. So if you're working on something really complex, obviously you're not going to fit it all on one sheet. And in that case, what you can do is create additional sheets. Now if you look down in the bottom left, there's a button here that says Quick Add, and you can just click Add and create as many sheets as you want. One thing worth noting here is that this may be limited on the personal use license. You may be limited to one sheet, so just be aware of that. The last thing I'll show you is how to export these as a PDF. And if we go up to the top here on the right, you'll see an icon PDF. Just click on Export and Export as PDF. You can select all sheets or a particular sheet to save. I'm just going to click Open PDF, click OK. I can save that anywhere I want, so I'm just going to save it on my desktop. That should open that up in Firefox, and here we go. So this is the drawing I just created in Fusion 360. I now have it downloaded as a PDF, and I can use that however I want. Again, the export feature might be limited in the personal use license, in which case if you go up to the file icon in the top left, click on Print, you should be able to select in here Microsoft Print PDF. If you click on that, select your sheet. I'm going to use selected sheet 1, hit print, and that'll again ask you if you want to save it. As you can see, it saves it by default in a vertical orientation, but we can easily change it. In the top right here, there's 2 arrows. Click on that, rotate anti-clockwise, and there we go. We have our design exported from Fusion 360, ready to be sent to a manufacturer or a workshop, or even just stored in your own workshop in a folder somewhere. Always useful to keep these around, and it's good practice to create these for your own designs because it can help improve your own workflow. That's it for this video. As always, I hope you learned something. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.